First, know your process, know your systems really well. Before you ever even get your first one going, know what systems you're going to use to make the experiences as good as possible for everyone involved. Two, I'd say work within the guidelines and rules that are out there. I've heard of people trying to do lease arbitrage by renting a place and then not disclosing to the landlord or the property management company that they intend to use it as a short-term rental. That needs to be part of the conversation, from the very first time you walk in the door. They need to know what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and then three, put all the systems in place to protect everyone.
Welcome to the Massive and Passive Income Show. I'm Colter, and today we have Randall Cloud with Cloud Dream Homes with us. Cloud Dream Homes. It shouldn't be so hard to say, but it is not hard to say.
You'd be surprised. I actually have a trailer that the title on it is now Cloud's Dream House or something like that. Because it's a hard one.
There you go. Well, Randall is a short-term rental operator and he's been building his business. This specific one for the last 2 years, implementing 24 homes in 24 months.
That is correct.
Well, and you're doing it through a method that is unknown to a lot of people and is unique in the fact that it's not, you're just acquiring homes. So tell us about this short-term rental arbitrage and what it means and why you've started to tackle this method instead of others.
Yeah, lease arbitrage is kind of one of the newest, most fun innovations, I guess you could say, in real estate investing. It's been around for a little bit, but it's relatively new. And the general idea is that you go in and you lease out a property from somebody else, whether that's a landlord, an owner, a property management company, whatever. You rent a property just like you would if you were going to go live in it. And then with their permission, you furnish it, you put technology in it, and then you turn around and you sublet it from a short-term to a mid-term, sometimes even another long-term basis, but as a fully furnished unit instead.
Okay. So, and you've chosen this method. Now you've invested in other properties where you're buying the properties, but in this method, you're just simply controlling the property rather than having to come up with all of the cash, all of the financing, whatever it may be, to own the property long term.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually still even have a handful of long-term rental properties, and we'll continue to grow that side of our business. Mostly my wife handles that side, so I don't have to deal with tenants, I deal with guests. And there's a lot of ways to get into short-term rentals especially, and there's pros and cons to all of them. I'm not going to say one's better than the other. I've done lease arbitrage in my business because I don't ever want to have to deal with maintenance. So I exclusively work with apartment complexes where they have a really good maintenance staff on hand that lives on site and can handle any issue that comes up, even if it's in the middle of the night. So I never have to be the one who's, hurrying to fix that. So that's the thing that I've really loved about it, and the reason why I stick with, if I'm going to do short-term rentals, I use lease arbitrage to acquire those properties, and anything that we purchase is just going to be a normal long-term rental.
I love what you said in regards to, you don't want to be the one getting up. And what I'm looking into is you don't want to be the one getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go fix somebody's toilet because they clogged it, right?
Yeah.
Or like you want to have somebody that's on site ready to respond to those kinds of emergencies. And I think a lot of people won't get into real estate investing at all because they're afraid of, I don't want to get up at 1 o'clock in the morning, or, how did you make that decision? What kind of bridged that gap, and what motivated you to go this direction?
Yeah, you're right. That's one of the most common things that I hear when people are like, oh, you rent properties, you're a landlord, you own properties, you have tenants. And they're like, oh, I could never do that. I don't want to be a landlord. Owning property doesn't mean you have to be a landlord. Those are two very separate things. But in the short-term rental space, I just decided that I want to be able to build a business that's scalable, that really requires the bare minimum amount of employee effort on my part. So I don't want to have to be the person doing that. I don't want to have to hire teams of people to do that. I'm using systems that are already in place, already existing, where I don't have to pay a dime extra when something like this happens. I don't even have to pay someone hourly to go fix the water heater, and I don't have to be the one getting up in the middle of the night to do it myself. There's somebody who's contractually obligated to just do it for free for me because that's part of the service they're providing by me renting and leasing. And that makes it so that my costs are very fixed, very standard. I know what to expect. I don't have surprise maintenance items coming up, and that just helps me build a better business.
Yeah, fascinating. So what are you implementing into your business that allows for this to be a scalable model?
Oh, systems, lots and lots of systems. The amount of systems that I have in place and the amount of time I spend every week just optimizing and looking for new systems and trying to build better ways to automate things. There's just so many things that I've done that handle as much as possible automatically in the background. There's also a few guiding principles that determine how I run my business. And some of those are things like tell guests what they need to know before they ever think they need to know it. If they're the ones realizing, oh, I need to know this piece of information, then they're going to come ask you for it, and that's going to require some type of input. But if you've already told them that piece of information before they can think of needing that piece of information, then the questions never arise, or at least you can drastically mitigate how much those questions arise.
Wow, I love that. So you have some background in UX, which is user experience, correct?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how you've used that background in the experience of users, of whether it's guests or it's been past platforms that you've been involved in.
Yeah.
What are some of the cool things that you're excited about of what you've implemented, and what is next for you?
Honestly, that's a favorite part, like my favorite part of what I do in my business is this, trying to design a user experience that is the best. So one of the things that we do in user experience is called contextual inquiry. And I guess first I should clarify, there's a lot of misconceptions about UX. It gets really closely tied up with UI in web design or in app development. And UI is user interface, UX is user experience. And while they oftentimes work hand in hand to accomplish a goal, user experience is really about what is the process, what is the experience that a guest has. So even in a web design thing, that could be when they come to a website, what does the user expect to see there? Where do they expect to see it? How are they going to, what is the workflow they're going to use to get through the process of what they're trying to do in this experience? But that applies to the real world too. User experience is how you lay out a business, a brick and mortar business. How do you lay out your store? User experience goes into that. And so the same thing for my business. What is the user experience? From the time someone looks at one of my properties and considers, do I want to rent this property? What is the experience they're having? And then once I push that button to actually book it, now what's happening? What are they going to expect? When are they going to want access to the property? When are they going to want a door code? What type of things are they going to do? What are they going to do when they arrive at the property? Obviously, I think most people would agree, one of the first things you're going to do once you get through that door is try and connect to Wi-Fi. And so making sure, how do they have access to Wi-Fi? Is it an easy system? Do they know where to find their Wi-Fi information so that they don't have to be asking for it? And so you just kind of think about, in contextual inquiry, you think about what is the experience that the user is going to have? What is the workflow that they're going to go through? And then how do you optimize that and make that as smooth, easy, painless as possible? And so I just love doing that in every part of my business. And a lot of that comes from guest feedback. They give you feedback and you're able to take that and, decide, oh, you know what, there's a little, like every single week I realize something else where I'm like, I could say that a little bit better. Even if I just change 2 words around in this, it's going to make the entire experience easier because they're going to understand more what to expect. Or, I didn't have this product before in my units, like, I don't know, a certain type of coffee or tea or something that a lot of people start asking for. You start seeing people, and they're not complaining, they're just like, oh, hey, do you happen to have chai herbal tea? Oh, no, I don't. And you get that question enough times and you go, maybe I'll start providing this very specific thing that people are asking for.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my favorite part of my business is optimizing the user experience.
Awesome. Well, you said something about making it easy and, I'm just going to summarize it, as easy and simple as possible. Yeah. How many times did it take somebody to ask for the Wi-Fi password before you were able to make that automated to where, hey, this is what it is?
Yeah. Fortunately, that was one of those things I started off just knowing that was going to happen. I knew that people were going to, so I've always had the Wi-Fi password there. In fact, about 4 hours after a guest books one of my places, they'll get an email that starts off asking them, what's the Wi-Fi password? And when do I get my door code? And then a few other questions, including what's the purpose of life? And then I go ahead and follow that up with, we've answered all these questions and more here in your digital guidebook. And we send them a guidebook that they now have access to, days, months, depending on how long they booked in advance. They have this they have this guidebook available to them long before they ever show up to the property. So theoretically, if they wanted to, they already knew what the Wi-Fi password was before they walked in the door. Now, not everyone reads everything, so there is a large amount of people who still don't see that we've already given them the Wi-Fi password there, even though they'll have a message that says, what's the Wi-Fi password? And then they respond to that with, hey, what's the Wi-Fi password? So not everyone sees that. And so one of the other things that we've done is implemented AI responder bots, things that can automatically understand what a guest is asking for. And then as long as it's something that I've given the AI permission to share or authorize, it can automatically tell them that. So it's just one more place that they have it. We've now also added a guest portal. So they have a guidebook that has the Wi-Fi in it, and now they have a guest portal that they also get from the second they book that has their door code and the Wi-Fi password right there from long before they've ever arrived at the property. And then on top of that, should they not read either of those things, there's always my AI bot that will automatically respond to them with, again, what the Wi-Fi password is.
Well, isn't that amazing? Randall has all the answers to all the questions, even what is the purpose of life. So we're going to have to refer to his guest book so that we can get that defined for us and make sure that we understand that post podcast episode. Well, so what would you say to somebody that's just barely trying to start a business? Maybe it is around short-term rental arbitrage, and let's just focus on that. If they wanted to get into this, what are like 3 things that you would say you start with to make sure that it reflects positively on this profession of being a short-term rental operator?
It's a great question. The 3 things I guess I would say for someone starting out is, first, know your process, know your systems really well. Before you ever even get your first one going, know what systems you're going to use to make the experiences as good as possible for everyone involved. 2, I'd say work within the guidelines and rules that are out there. One of the things that tarnishes our industry and our reputation the most is people out there kind of, I don't even know how to put this, but doing it maybe against city regulations, against guidelines. I've heard of people trying to do lease arbitrage by renting a place and then not disclosing to the landlord or the property management company that they intend to use it as a short-term rental. That needs to be part of the conversation, from the very first time you walk in the door. They need to know what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. And then 3, put all the systems in place to protect everyone. Protect yourself. Make sure you're well protected. Make sure your landlord or your property management company is well protected. Make sure your guests are well protected. You want every single person in this to feel safe, to be safe, and to not have future problems come up down the road because you didn't think through things. And I think this might count as a 4th thing, but one of the biggest things that I see is, unfortunately, people try to skimp out, like they try and do it as cheaply as possible and not put certain things in place that need to be in place. And one of the key parts of that is monitoring systems. So there's noise monitoring, there's security systems, there's all kinds of things that you can do to protect the property, yourself, the guest, the place. And people, when they're first starting out, say, well, I just want to see how, cheaply I can get everything in the door. And unfortunately, then they have a cheap short-term rental in the worst kind of way. And it leads to a bad experience for one or more parties involved. And ultimately, that brings down the entire reputation of our industry.
Yeah. Well, thank you for those, and the extra credits of going to number 4, and there's 5 to 10 more. I'm sure that we could go through and talking about short-term rental arbitrage, short-term rentals, the professionalism that you're bringing to the marketplace in this specific segment of the investment industry. So Cloud Dream Homes and Randall Cloud, appreciate him joining us this morning and being able to talk about short-term rental arbitrage and how to implement that, how to bring professionalism to the market. And thanks for joining us on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.